Snow drifted like ash across the marble steps, swirling in frantic circles under the golden glow of the porch light. Each flake melted the moment it touched Lila's skin, leaving trails of cold that stung like needles. Her arms trembled around the baby wrapped in a thin, faded blue blanket. Noah whimpered softly, his breath forming tiny clouds against her neck. The night had grown colder than she'd ever felt before. Colder than the bus stop bench where she'd tried to sleep. Colder than the alley she'd hidden in the night before that. Her mother had promised she'd be back before dark. Just a few minutes, she'd said, brushing snow from Lila's hair. Keep him close, sweetheart. I'll find something for us to eat. That had been hours ago, maybe more. The world had turned white since then, and the roads had vanished under the storm. Lila pressed her bare feet harder against the step to stop them from shaking. Her toes burned. Noah stirred again, a fragile cry rising above the wind. Shh, she whispered, rocking him as best she could. It's okay, Noah. Mama's coming back. The words fell into the snow like broken glass. She didn't believe them anymore. The mansion before her seemed too big, too silent. The windows glowed faintly behind thick curtains, their golden light spilling onto the snow like warmth trapped behind glass. Lila stared at the enormous oak door and the brass knocker shaped like a lion's head. She hesitated, her small fingers trembling before she finally raised her hand and knocked. The sound was swallowed by the wind. She tried again, louder this time. Please, she whispered. Please open. For a moment, nothing moved. The house stood still as the grave. Lila lowered her hand, pressing Noah's head closer to her chest. The cold gnawed deeper into her bones. Just as she turned away, the door creaked. Warm light spilled out, catching the falling snow in golden dust. A man stepped forward, tall, sharp-featured, his dark coat tailored perfectly, his shoes untouched by snow. His hair was neat despite the storm, his expression unreadable. He didn't speak at first. His eyes moved from Lila's face to the baby, to her reddened fingers gripping the blanket. What are you doing here? His voice was low, smooth, but edged with disbelief. Lila's throat ached as she tried to speak. Please, she managed. We're cold. He's hungry. The man blinked as if unsure whether to believe what stood before him. A barefoot girl and a baby in the snow. Where's your family? He asked. Mom left. Her voice cracked, small as a whisper. She said she'd be right back. The wind surged, snow whipping between them. Ethan Cole stood in the doorway, his hand tightening on the frame. He'd built a life where everything obeyed him. Markets, mergers, men twice his age. Yet in this moment, faced with a child begging for warmth, he felt powerless. He looked past her into the storm, half expecting to see a woman appear, a mother running toward her children. But there was only the swirling dark. His jaw clenched. How long have you been out here? Since last night, Lila said. We tried the bus stop, but... Her voice trailed off. Noah whimpered again, his tiny body trembling. Ethan's eyes softened despite himself. Something deep and buried pressed against his chest, a memory faint and painful. He saw himself as a boy, standing at another door, begging his father to let him in after his mother left. The memory vanished, but it left a crack. He took a slow breath. Come inside, he said. Lila froze. You won't send us away? Not tonight. She hesitated only a moment before stepping toward the light. The warmth hit her like a wave, dizzying after hours in the cold. Snow melted from her hair, dripping onto the marble floor. Noah quieted, nuzzling against her chest. Ethan shut the door and the storm vanished behind them. The silence that followed was almost holy, just the sound of the baby's breathing, the faint tick of a clock somewhere deeper in the house. Lila clutched the blanket tighter around Noah and turned toward the fire blazing in the distant room. Ethan's eyes followed her. This frail child with frostbitten hands and eyes too old for her age. He didn't know why he'd opened the door. Maybe pity, maybe guilt, maybe something he hadn't felt in years. He looked once more at the snow piling against the window and whispered under his breath as if to no one at all, just for tonight. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, for the first time in years, Ethan Cole's house wasn't empty. The fire crackled inside the marble hearth, its glow rippling across the grand foyer like liquid gold. Lila stood frozen near the doorway, afraid to move, her small frame dwarfed by the high ceilings and sweeping staircase that spiraled into the shadows above. The walls were lined with portraits, Stern-faced men and elegant women who stared down at her with eyes that seemed to follow every breath. Ethan Cole's mansion was a cathedral of silence. No ticking clocks, no hum of television, no echo of footsteps but his own. It was the kind of house that had forgotten what laughter sounded like. He removed his gloves slowly, each movement deliberate, controlled. "Come," he said, motioning toward the fire. Lila hesitated, her gaze darting toward the door again as if expecting her mother to appear through the storm. When she didn't, she followed Ethan into the living room. Her bare feet left small wet marks across the polished floor. The firelight painted her face in amber and gold, softening the exhaustion etched in her eyes. She sank to her knees near the hearth, clutching Noah against her chest. The baby whimpered weakly, his cheeks pale, his lips a faint shade of blue. Ethan crouched near the fireplace, reaching for the iron poker. Sparks leapt upward, illuminating his face. There was something cold in his expression. Habitual, trained, but beneath it flickered something else. He turned his eyes to the girl. "Your mother," he said quietly. "What's her name?" Lila looked up, startled by the question. "Sarah." Ethan's hand froze mid-motion. The poker clanged softly against the brick. "Sarah." His voice came out thin, distant. He masked it with a breath and stirred the fire again. Lila didn't notice the tremor that passed through him. "She said we'd stay with a friend," she whispered. "But the man at the bus stop yelled at us." "So we walked. I saw the light here." Ethan stared into the flames, his reflection fractured across the fireglass. The name echoed in his mind, hollow and dangerous. Sarah, he knew that name. Too well. He rose abruptly, breaking the silence. "You need to warm up," he said. "Wait here," Lila nodded. Ethan disappeared into the hallway, his footsteps fading toward the kitchen. The wall seemed to hum with tension in his absence. The wind moaned outside, rattling the windows like fists against glass. Lila rocked Noah gently, whispering his name. The baby stirred but didn't wake. Her eyes wandered across the room, the chandelier glimmering overhead, the massive piano by the window, the shelves of books untouched for years. Everything looked perfect, untouched, but there was something hollow beneath the beauty. She noticed a photograph face down on the mantel. The frame was crystal heavy. Carefully, she reached up and turned it over. The image inside was faded but clear enough. A young woman with soft blonde hair, smiling in the sunlight beside a man she didn't recognize. Before she could study it further, Ethan's voice broke the silence behind her. "Don't touch that." She flinched and spun around. Ethan stood in the doorway, a folded wool blanket in one hand, a steaming mug in the other. His eyes, calm moments ago, had darkened. I'm sorry," she stammered. "I didn't mean," he exhaled slowly, lowering his tone. "It's fine." He set the mug on the table beside her. "Hot cocoa." "Careful, it's warm." She took it with both hands, grateful despite her fear. "Thank you, sir." Ethan didn't respond. He turned toward the photograph she'd touched, staring at it a long moment before setting it face down again. "Wrap him in this," he said, offering the blanket. Lila obeyed, gently tucking it around Noah. The baby made a small noise of contentment and fell into deeper sleep. Lila's shoulders relaxed for the first time in hours. Ethan sank into the armchair opposite her. His jaw was tight. He watched the fire, the girl, the baby, and the shadows shifting across the floor. "How old is he?" he asked. "Almost 1, she said softly. The clock on the mantel chimed once, sharp and lonely. Ethan's gaze drifted to the snow swirling outside the tall windows. "You can stay here tonight," he said finally. "Just tonight." Lila nodded. But in her eyes, behind exhaustion and gratitude, there was something like fear. She clutched Noah tighter, her fingers trembling. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Lila," he said carefully, "when your mother left you, did she say where she was going?" The girl's lips trembled. She said she was coming to find him. Find who? Her answer was barely a whisper. "My father." Ethan's breath caught in his chest. The fire popped, scattering embers across the hearth. For a long moment he couldn't speak. Outside, the storm wailed through the trees. Inside, silence settled again, thick and heavy, pulsing with something unspoken. And as Ethan looked at the child asleep in Lila's arms, a single thought clawed its way into his mind, one he didn't dare voice aloud. Could it be? The fire had burned down to glowing embers when Ethan woke, still seated in the armchair. His head ached from the stiffness of sleeping upright, but something else stirred him. A sound, a faint, broken humming. He turned his head. Lila was curled near the fireplace, wrapped in a blanket too big for her, her hair scattered over the pillow he'd given her. Her small voice trembled as she hummed a lullaby, soft, off-key, but hauntingly familiar. Noah's tiny hand clutched a fold of her sleeve as he slept against her chest. Ethan's pulse quickened. That song. He hadn't heard it in years, decades. He knew every note. His mother used to sing it when he was a boy, before the shouting, before his father's anger drove her away. He stood quietly, careful not to wake them. But the melody wouldn't leave him. He walked to the window and pulled the curtain aside. Outside, dawn was beginning to break. The snow-covered world tinted pale blue beneath the first light. The storm had passed, but its remnants still howled across the open fields beyond the iron gate. He closed the curtain again, jaw tightening. His home had never felt this small before. By the time Lila stirred, Ethan was already in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, standing over a skillet. He didn't remember deciding to cook, he just needed something to do. The smell of sizzling eggs filled the air, foreign and unsettling in a house that had lived on takeout and silence for years. Lila appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. Noah was still asleep in the crook of one arm. "It smells good," she whispered. Ethan turned. She looked fragile in the morning light, her eyes puffy from exhaustion but bright with cautious gratitude. "Sit," he said simply. She perched at the edge of the chair, watching him like someone watching a stranger perform a magic trick. "Do you live here all by yourself?" she asked. Ethan hesitated. "Yes. Doesn't it get lonely?" The knife in his hand paused mid-cut. He set it down. "I like quiet." She nodded slowly, though he could see in her eyes she didn't believe him. As they ate in silence, Ethan found himself studying her posture, the way she tore tiny pieces of bread and offered them first to Noah before eating herself. She carried herself with a discipline that no child should have learned. "Your mother taught you to take care of him?" Lila nodded. "She said he needs me more than anything." She looked down at her lap. "Even when she's tired, she smiles for him." Ethan's throat tightened. "When did she last smile for you?" he asked quietly. Lila blinked at him, unsure how to answer. "Before she cried." The words landed like a knife in his chest. Ethan rose abruptly, needing air. He walked into his office, the only room that still resembled who he'd been before that night. Glass walls, steel desk, everything in its place. Order, logic, control. But none of it mattered now. He sat behind the desk and stared at the dark computer screen. His reflection looked older, colder. He unlocked the drawer, the one he hadn't opened in years. Inside was a stack of documents, contracts, investments, and a single photograph, yellowing at the edges. Her face stared back at him. Sarah. He'd met her long before his empire, before the steel walls went up around his heart. She'd worked at the small marketing firm where he'd interned after college, lively, gentle, always humming the same lullaby that still echoed in his head. He'd loved her. He'd also walked away from her without explanation, chasing ambition and leaving her in the wreckage, and now, a child stood in his living room, wrapped in a blanket, whispering the name of the woman he'd abandoned. He pressed a hand to his temple. "No," he murmured. "It's not possible." But the name. The lullaby. The blue blanket embroidered with EC, he remembered it now. He'd given that blanket to Sarah himself years ago, before their final fight. He reached for his phone and opened the search page. His hands trembled as he typed Sarah Bennett, missing. The results appeared instantly. A missing persons report dated 2 months ago. A woman matching her description, last seen leaving a homeless shelter with a baby boy. Ethan's stomach dropped. His vision tunneled. He didn't hear Lila until she spoke from the doorway. "She said she was going to find someone," the girl whispered. Ethan turned. Lila stood barefoot, clutching Noah close, her eyes wide with something between hope and fear. "She said she was going to find you." Ethan froze. Every breath in his chest vanished. The room seemed to close around him, the silence suffocating. His heartbeat roared in his ears. "How do you know my name?" he managed. Lila swallowed hard. "Mom said it," her voice broke. She said, "If I can find Ethan Cole, he'll help us." Ethan's hands trembled. He sank slowly into his chair. The air around him felt colder than the snow outside. For the first time in years, the man who never flinched at failure who'd stared down billion-dollar losses without blinking, felt the ground slip beneath him. He looked at the girl, the reflection of a past he'd buried, and at the baby wrapped in his blanket. He wanted to deny it. He wanted to believe it was coincidence, but deep down something inside him already knew the truth. And as the clock ticked in the silence between them, Ethan realized that the storm outside had been nothing compared to the one about to begin inside his own heart. The night returned heavy and full, pressing against the windows like a held breath. Snow whispered across the glass. The storm had passed, but its silence was worse. It was the kind of silence that made every creak of the house sound alive. Leela sat near the fire again, her thin frame wrapped tightly in the wool blanket. Noah slept soundly against her, his small chest rising and falling in rhythm with the ticking clock on the mantel. She looked peaceful in the glow, but her eyes never left Ethan. He stood by the window, the dim reflection of firelight dancing against the pane. A phone sat silent on the table beside him. The screen still showed the missing persons report he'd found earlier. Sarah Bennett, age 30, missing from Boston, last seen with an infant boy. Every line of the report pulled tighter around his throat. She said she was coming to find you. Lila whispered again, breaking the quiet. Ethan turned, his face shadowed, unreadable. When did she tell you that? Lila looked down. The night before she left. She said she had to go talk to someone who could help us. She said his name was Ethan Cole. She looked up slowly. You. He sat down across from her, elbows on his knees, his eyes locked on the fire. The flames flickered, reflected in his gaze like buried guilt. What else did she say? He asked. Lila bit her lip. She said if she didn't come back, I should find you. She said you'd know what to do. Ethan's breath hitched. He leaned back, fingers pressing into his temples. The edges of old memories clawed their way forward. Sarah's laughter, her tears, the way she'd looked at him the last night they spoke. You'll regret this, Ethan, she had whispered as she walked away. Not because of me, because one day you'll realize you had a heart and you locked it away. He'd built an empire on locking it away. Lila watched him carefully, uncertain whether he was angry or broken. Do you know my mom? She asked finally. He didn't answer at first. His throat felt too tight. I did, he said at last. A long time ago. Something flickered across her face, hope, fear, confusion. Then you can help her, right? Ethan looked into her eyes, those piercing blue eyes that mirrored Sarah's so clearly it almost hurt. I don't know, he said softly. A sudden thud broke through the moment. Lila flinched. Ethan turned sharply toward the front of the house. It came again. A heavy knock against the oak door. Lila's breath quickened. It's her, she whispered, clutching Noah tighter. Ethan rose, crossing the marble floor in a few strides. But something about the knock made his skin crawl. It wasn't frantic. It was measured, slow, deliberate. He reached for the door handle and paused. Stay there, he said without turning. Lila's voice trembled. What if it's, stay with your brother? He opened the door. A blast of cold air rushed in, sweeping through the foyer. On the porch stood a man in a black overcoat, snow gathering on his shoulders. His eyes were sharp, gray, and far too calm for someone caught in a storm. Mr. Cole, the man said evenly. Apologies for the late hour. Ethan narrowed his gaze. Who are you? The man reached into his pocket and held up a badge. Detective Rowan, Boston Police. Ethan's shoulders stiffened. Boston? Yes. Rowan's eyes flicked past him into the house. We're following up on a missing persons case. Sarah Bennett. You may have heard about it. Ethan's pulse thundered in his ears. He forced his expression to remain neutral. Why come here? Rowan smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. We received a tip that someone matching her daughter's description was seen near this area. His voice lowered. With a baby. Ethan's heart sank. Behind him, Lila's voice called softly. Mr. Ethan? Rowan's gaze sharpened. You're not alone, are you? Ethan blocked the doorway. It's late. You should come back in the morning. The detective's tone cooled. This woman's been missing for weeks. Her children might be in danger. Surely a man like you wouldn't stand in the way of the law. Ethan forced a calm he didn't feel. If I had information, I'd share it. But I don't. Rowan's eyes lingered a moment longer than necessary. Then he nodded. All right, Mr. Cole, but if you do see them, call me. He slipped a card onto the porch rail. Sometimes good intentions can look an awful lot like guilt. He turned and walked back toward a black sedan idling at the end of the drive. Ethan shut the door, heart hammering. The warmth of the house suddenly felt suffocating. Lila stared at him, eyes wide. "Was that the police?" "Yes," he said quietly. Her face went pale. "You're not going to tell them, are you?" He looked at her, this tiny creature trembling with fear, clutching her brother like a mother herself, and realized what she was really asking. "Are you going to give us away?" Ethan shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "You're safe here." The words came out before he could stop them. But once they were spoken, they felt true. That night, after Lila finally drifted into uneasy sleep, Ethan sat by the dying fire. He stared at the card the detective had left. The name gleaming under the firelight, Detective Rowan, Missing Persons Division. He turned it over and froze. Written in faint pencil on the back were 4 words that made his blood run cold. "She's not who you think." Ethan looked toward the children sleeping on the rug. The storm outside had ended, but the real one, the one that would tear open everything he thought he knew, had only just begun. The card lay on the table where Ethan had dropped it, its edges curling slightly in the warmth of the fire. The handwriting on the back, "She's not who you think," burned through his mind like a whisper he couldn't silence. He stared at it long after midnight. The fire was dying again, and the house had sunk back into its old aching quiet. Only the faint sigh of the wind and Noah's small rhythmic breathing filled the vast room. Ethan rubbed a hand over his face. Sleep was impossible. His thoughts wouldn't stop circling the same words. The detective's tone, that cryptic message, Sarah's name. "She's not who you think." He rose, restless, and walked through the house, his footsteps echoing off marble and glass. The walls seemed closer tonight. The portraits of his ancestors glared down, smug and lifeless. Their fortune had been built on power, manipulation, control, the same things Ethan had perfected. Yet for the first time he felt like a trespasser in his own empire. He stopped outside the study. The air in there was colder than the rest of the house, as though the memories themselves refused to warm. The drawer was still open from earlier. The photograph of Sarah lay beside the letter he'd found, his father's letter, the one hinting at a secret support for a woman Ethan once loved. His father's signature looked oddly shaky for a man who'd never allowed weakness. Ethan unfolded the paper again. The last line still chilled him. "She came to me asking for protection. I told her I couldn't give her that. Not while your name still meant something." He'd never understood what that meant before. Now he wasn't sure he wanted to. "Mr. Ethan?" The voice made him jump. He turned. Lila stood in the doorway, barefoot again, clutching Noah. The blanket trailed behind her like a shadow. "I couldn't sleep," she whispered. "The thunder." "There's no thunder," he said softly. Her eyes darted toward the window. "I heard something outside." Ethan frowned, walking past her toward the window. He pulled the curtain aside. The driveway lay empty, no cars, no tracks, just the heavy white stillness of snow. "Probably the wind," he said, though unease crawled under his skin. Lila shifted Noah on her shoulder. "That man at the door, he scared me." Ethan crouched to meet her eyes. "He won't come back. Promise?" "I promise," she nodded slowly. "Mom always said promises only count if you mean them." Ethan smiled faintly, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Then I mean it." He led her back to the fire. She sat, rocking the baby gently, whispering fragments of that same lullaby. The melody twisted through the house again, sweet and broken. When she finished, she looked up. "Do you think Mom's still alive?" Ethan hesitated. The truth, he didn't know. The detective's message echoed again. "She's not who you think. I hope so," he said. "But we'll find out soon." "How?" Ethan looked toward his phone on the mantel. "I have ways." At dawn, he made his first call. Not to the police, but to a private investigator. The man owed him favors from a time before Ethan had become a CEO. Back when he'd handled things that required silence and money. "Name's Sarah Bennett," Ethan said. "Last known location, Boston, missing, I need everything." The investigator's tone was wary. "You're getting involved in a missing person case?" "Not a case," Ethan said. "A responsibility." He hung up before the man could ask questions. Hours passed. The sun rose high but gave no warmth. Ethan worked through the day like a man possessed. pacing, searching old archives, reading every report he could find. Lila stayed close, always quiet, always watching. Noah slept most of the afternoon, his breathing steady. By nightfall, the investigator called back. Ethan's stomach tightened before he even answered. "I found something," the man said. His voice carried a strange edge. "You're Sarah Bennett. She wasn't who you thought she was." Ethan's heart dropped. "Explain." "She used aliases. 2 in the last 5 years. Worked in shelters, moved from city to city. There's more. She was being followed. Records show a man named Rowan visited her twice before she vanished." Ethan froze. "Detective Rowan?" "That's the name." The line crackled. "But here's the thing. There's no active detective by that name in the Boston Police Department. Closest match died 5 years ago." Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying whoever came to your house last night wasn't a cop." A chill swept through him, deeper than any winter wind. He turned slowly toward the window. The night outside was black, endless. Somewhere in the distance an engine growled. Faint but real. "Stay on the line," he said sharply. But the call dropped. The screen went dark. A noise echoed from the kitchen. A soft clatter, metal against tile. Ethan moved fast, his heartbeat slamming in his ears. "Lila?" No answer. He crossed the hall and froze. The back door, the one leading to the snow-covered patio, stood open. Snowflakes drifted inside, melting on the tile. The curtain billowed gently with the wind. "Lila," he called again. Then came the cry, faint, desperate. A child's voice. "Mr. Ethan!" He bolted toward the sound. Through the doorway, across the yard, a figure in black moved swiftly through the snow, clutching something small. A child. Lila's scream cut through the night. "Noah!" Ethan ran. The cold hit him like a wall. His feet pounded through the snow, his breath clouding in the frozen air. The figure was already near the tree line, tall, purposeful, carrying the baby. "Stop!" Ethan roared. The man didn't stop. Lila stumbled behind him, sobbing, falling to her knees. "Please, Mr. Ethan, he's taking him." Ethan didn't think. He surged forward faster than he'd moved in years. The snow was deep, the cold sharp enough to slice his lungs, but adrenaline burned hotter than fear. When he reached the tree line, the figure vanished into the dark. Only silence remained, and the echo of the baby's fading cry. Snow fell like shards of glass from a bruised sky. The wind howled through the trees, tearing at Ethan's coat as he ran. His breath came in ragged bursts, each one a ghost in the freezing air. Ahead of him, faint footprints carved a jagged trail through the white. "Lila!" he shouted, but the storm swallowed his voice. Behind him, she stumbled after him, crying out for her brother. Her small figure barely visible against the night, she tripped and fell, but rose again, clutching at the dark with trembling hands. "He's gone," she sobbed. "Noah's gone." "Not yet," Ethan said under his breath, eyes locked on the tracks ahead. He pressed forward, heart pounding, blood screaming in his ears. The footprints led toward the woods that bordered the property. Acres of frozen silence where the world itself seemed to hold its breath. A flicker of movement caught his eye. A shadow, tall, lean, moving fast through the trees. "Stop!" Ethan roared, the sound half rage, half fear. The man didn't stop. He disappeared deeper into the forest. Ethan followed without thinking, his shoes slipping on the ice, branches clawing at his coat. He wasn't the cold, unfeeling CEO now. He wasn't the man who built empires and crushed rivals. He was something else entirely. Raw, furious, alive. At the base of a hill, the trail split. The snow was churned up, messy, signs of a struggle. Ethan crouched low, his pulse hammering. He found something half buried in the drift. Noah's blanket. The one with his initials stitched into the corner. He gripped it tightly. E.C. The wind moaned like a living thing. "Mr. Ethan," Lila's voice echoed faintly behind him. Closer now. "Stay there," he shouted back. He scanned the darkness and every shadow, every tree, and then he saw it. A faint light flickering ahead. Yellow, distant, moving. A cabin. He ran. The closer he got, the clearer it became. An old hunting cabin half buried in snow, smoke curling from a rusted chimney. The light came from inside. Ethan slowed, crouching near the steps. His breath misted in front of him. He could hear voices, one calm, one trembling. He edged closer to the door. "He's worth more than you think," a man's voice said. It was smooth, confident. the same voice that had stood on his porch pretending to be Detective Rowan. Then another voice, faint, quivering. Sarah's Ethan froze. "Please," she was saying. "You don't understand. He's not yours to take." A sound like a slap broke the air. Ethan's fists clenched. Sarah. Alive. He didn't hesitate. He slammed his shoulder into the door. The wood cracked open, the hinges groaning as he burst inside. The man in black spun around. The fake detective. His gun glinted briefly in the dim light before Ethan tackled him, driving him hard into the floorboards. The weapon clattered away. Ethan's rage was volcanic. Years of guilt, loss, and denial exploding all at once. He pinned the man down, fists trembling above him. "Who are you?" he growled. "Why take the baby?" The man's mouth curled into a cold smile. "Ask Sarah." Ethan turned sharply toward her. She stood near the hearth, pale and shaking, clutching Noah against her chest. Her eyes, the same eyes he'd once loved, met his, full of fear and something deeper. "Sarah." She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You shouldn't have come. What is going on?" he demanded. "Who is he?" The fake detective laughed bitterly from the floor. "You still don't know, do you?" "Shut up," Ethan snapped. Sarah's voice cracked. "Ethan, please. You don't understand. He's not with the police." "Then who the hell is he?" Sarah's hands tightened around the baby. "He works for your father's company." Ethan froze. "My father's dead. His company isn't," she said. "He left it in the hands of people who would do anything to protect his name. Anything, including hiding what he did." The man on the floor smirked. "And what he did was create you, Mr. Cole, and her." The room spun. "What are you talking about?" The man tilted his head toward Sarah. "Ask her who the girl really is." Ethan turned, his voice rough. "Sarah, tell me." Sarah's tears fell faster now. "Ethan, Lila's not my daughter." The words hit him like ice. Sarah's voice trembled. "She's yours." Ethan staggered back a step, the walls closing in. "What?" "She's your daughter, Ethan," Sarah said. "From before I left. I couldn't tell you. Your father found out. He tried to make me disappear, to protect your reputation, the family name. I ran, I raised her as mine. But when Noah was born," her voice broke. "They found us again." Lila's cry rang from outside the door. "Mom!" Ethan turned toward the sound, but Sarah stopped him, her grip shaking. "Don't let them take her too." The man on the floor began to laugh again, low and cruel. Too late. A second shadow appeared in the doorway. Another man dressed the same, holding Lila by the wrist. She struggled, screaming, kicking at the snow. Ethan's blood turned to fire. He moved without thought, without hesitation. The storm outside howled back to life. Inside that old cabin, surrounded by snow and ghosts and secrets, the man who'd spent his life running from love finally understood what he was willing to fight for. The storm had quieted, but the forest breathed with tension. The snow outside the cabin glowed faintly blue beneath a hidden moon. Inside, time seemed to fracture, each heartbeat its own explosion of fear, love, and fury. Lila's cries filled the doorway, echoing into the cold. Ethan's eyes locked on her, then on the man gripping her arm. The intruder's expression was unreadable, his coat dusted with frost, a gun gleaming faintly at his side. "Let her go," Ethan said, voice low, steady. The voice that had once commanded boardrooms and markets now aimed at something far more precious. The man only smiled. "She's leverage," he said. "That's all she ever was," Lila whimpered, trying to twist free. "Please, mister." Her small voice trembled. "He's my dad." The man's smirk faltered for just a breath, and that heartbeat was all Ethan needed. He moved with instinct, not calculation. One hand caught the man's wrist, wrenching it sideways. The gun clattered into the snow. The man stumbled back and Ethan stepped between him and the children, spreading his arms as if his body could build a wall. "Sarah," he said, not turning. "Get them out, now!" Sarah hesitated. Then, clutching Noah close, she ran to Lila and pulled her free. Lila's hand slid into hers. Their silhouettes blurred together as they disappeared through the doorway into the storm. Ethan faced the two intruders. The fake detective glared from the floor, rising slowly with a grimace. "You should have stayed in your mansion, Cole," he hissed. "You don't know what you're protecting." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I know exactly what I'm protecting. The man lunged, but the years of control that had once made Ethan a master negotiator now became the cold precision of survival. He sidestepped, slamming the doorframe shut behind him. The cabin shuddered, snow falling from the rafters. The fake detective's eyes flicked to the fireplace poker lying near the hearth. He reached for it, but Ethan kicked it away. The iron rod rolled into the flames. Outside, Sarah's voice rose, "Ethan!" followed by the sharp crunch of snow. He ran to the door. In the clearing beyond, Sarah stood clutching both children, her coat torn, hair whipping around her face. The wind howled through the trees again. Beyond her, the black sedan from the driveway glimmered between the pines, its headlights off but its engine rumbling like a sleeping beast. Ethan's stomach dropped. There were more of them. "Get behind me," he said, moving toward her. The car door opened. A figure stepped out, older, broader, wearing a long gray coat. The snow bent around him as if unwilling to touch. Ethan froze. His breath caught in his throat. "Hello, son," the man said. The voice hadn't aged. Ethan's mind refused the truth for a moment. His father, Richard Colin, was dead. Buried years ago. The funeral had been public, the casket sealed, but the man in front of him was unmistakable. The same steel-gray eyes, the same cruel calm. "You're supposed to be gone?" The man smiled faintly. "You've always been naive, Ethan. I taught you better than that." Sarah's grip on the children tightened. "Don't listen to him," she whispered. "He'll twist it." "He always does," Ethan's heart hammered. "You had her followed," he said. "You tried to erase them." His father tilted his head. "I protected you. Your name, your future. That woman made a mistake when she tried to brand you with her shame." Ethan's voice cracked. "That mistake is my daughter." A silence thicker than the storm fell. Richard's smile faded. "Then you've already failed me." The word struck like a blow. For years, Ethan had lived by his father's code. Strength, precision, detachment. Never flinch. Never feel. And yet, standing here, between a frightened child and the man who had built his world on cruelty, Ethan felt something deeper than rage. He felt clarity. He turned to Sarah. "Take them to the car," he said quietly. "Now," Richard's expression hardened. "You walk away from this, and everything you've built, everything I gave you, dies with it." Ethan met his father's eyes. "Then let it die." For a long moment, the only sound was the wind. Then Richard stepped forward, snow crunching under his boots. "You think compassion makes you strong?" He said. "It makes you weak. It makes you disposable." Ethan's voice was calm, almost gentle. "It makes me human." He took Lila's hand. Her small fingers wrapped around his with trust so fierce it hurt. Richard's composure cracked, the faintest tremor of disbelief crossing his face. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," Ethan said. "But not tonight." He turned toward Sarah and Noah, guiding them toward the car at the edge of the woods. Every step through the snow felt heavier, as if the past itself were dragging behind him, begging to be carried one last time. When they reached the car, Sarah climbed into the back seat, holding both children close. Ethan slid into the driver's seat. The keys were still in the ignition. He hesitated, his breath fogging the glass. Outside, his father stood motionless in the falling snow, a dark figure fading into the white. For a fleeting second, Ethan thought he saw the same boy he'd once been, standing before that man's study door, begging to be seen, to be loved. Then he pressed the accelerator. The tires screamed against the ice, then caught traction. The car surged forward, cutting through the storm, headlights blazing into the dark. Lila's small voice rose from the back seat. "Mr. Ethan?" He looked at her through the mirror. Her face was pale, her eyes wide but shining. "Yeah?" She smiled faintly, clutching Noah close. "You kept your promise." Ethan swallowed hard. "Yeah," he whispered. "I did." Outside, the mansion grew smaller, a golden shadow swallowed by the snow. The past was behind them, for now. Ahead lay only white, endless, unwritten. Sarah leaned her head against the window, her breath fogging the glass. "What will you do now?" she asked quietly. Ethan looked at the road vanishing into the dark. "Start over." The storm thinned, giving way to dawn. Pale sunlight stretched across the horizon, soft and uncertain. Lila reached forward, her hand brushing his shoulder. "Can we stay with you?" Ethan smiled, eyes glistening. "You already are." The car disappeared down the empty road, leaving behind only the soft echo of its wheels and the promise of a new beginning. And in the mansion that once belonged to a man made of marble and mirrors, the fire finally went out, not with a hiss but with a sigh, like a story that had found its ending. Epilogue weeks later. In a small coastal town far from the city, a modest house stood on a hill overlooking the ocean. Lila chased seagulls on the sand. Noah laughed in Sarah's arms. And Ethan, no longer the man of glass towers and headlines, watched them from the porch. When the breeze shifted, he heard it again. That lullaby. Lila was singing it now, her voice carrying through the salt air, pure and unbroken. For the first time in his life, Ethan Cole didn't hear regret in its melody. He heard peace. And somewhere beyond the waves, the past finally let go.